Good evening. I'm Sarah Williams in Washington, and this is Crossroads Asia. Tonight on our program, an audit says the Japanese government is spending funds collected for tsunami reconstruction on unrelated projects. We continue our look at women's rights in Pakistan, and a Chinese-American politician speaks about her concerns as the U.S. election approaches. It's all ahead on VOA's Crossroads Asia. In Japan, a recent audit conducted for the government has found that about a quarter of the funds meant for reconstruction following last year's devastating earthquake and tsunami has been spent on unrelated costs, or say it could bring a storm surge of 1 to 1.5 women's rights in Pakistan. VOA's Dave DeForest looks at the influence of the law and of Islam as a possible path to progress.
Women's rights are advancing slowly and unevenly in Pakistan. In 2011, the Thomson Reuters Foundation published a survey of 213 gender experts indicating that Pakistan is the third most dangerous country for women in the world. It charged that 90% of Pakistani women suffer from domestic violence. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan issued a report in March that at least 943 women were killed last year as the result of so-called honor killings, in which relatives kill women who behave in ways that supposedly dishonor their families or tribes. Some blame the Islamic religious tradition of the country, but Pam Constable, long-term reporter for The Washington Post and author of the book Playing with Fire, Pakistan at War with Itself, says the problem is elsewhere.
It's not really Islam. It has much more to do with tribal societies in which men rule and in which, as I mentioned previously, the important thing is keeping the family, keeping the tribe strong, and the main way that's done is through marriage alliances.
Acknowledging a lack of rights for the country's women, Pakistan's Senate recently adopted a bill that calls for the setting up of a Women's Rights Commission. Niaz Shah, a law professor at England's Hull University, says actually there have been a spate of laws passed to try to end the problem.
There is a great deal of progress as far as the law is concerned.
Pam Constable agrees.
One of the really good things that's happened in Pakistan in the last several years is that the judiciary has become more independent under the leadership of the current Supreme Court Chief Justice, who's a very bold and reform-minded man, and he's made a lot of changes in the way things are done in the court system.
But Constable emphasizes that changes in the law are only the beginning.
The legal advances are a way to begin. Until fairly recently, you didn't have a strong judiciary. You didn't have anybody to back these ideas up. The state has always been very reluctant to intervene and apply its own laws, especially in these tribal situations.
Constable sees a need for women in more conservative rural areas to be better informed about their rights under the law.
I would say that, as far as I'm concerned, success would be something in which girls started getting better access to education in rural areas, and women started getting better access to information about their rights, and that there were not dramatic or radical changes in the society, but a hopefully spreading and widening and deepening of knowledge and information.
Constable says this does not mean that Pakistan must abandon its distinct Islamic culture and become just like the West.
The Western model can never be applied to societies that are so different from ours.
Professor Niaz Shah says Pakistan's Islamic heritage, far from being the problem, could actually provide the basis for the spread of human rights. In fact, he says giving attention to Islam is the only strategy that will work. Shaw argues that the Islamic culture is not the culprit. He says the problem is the violation of Islamic law inherent in some cultural practices.
The main problem is with the education. I think where people in a rural area, they would mix up cultural practices with religion. For instance, take the example of forced marriages. Under Islamic law, a marriage without consent is not valid, period. That's the judgment of the Supreme Court. That any textbook of Islamic law will tell you that. And that's full stop. But if you look at the practice, they say the parents would arrange marriages, they would force children, especially young women, to marry against their wishes.
Marcia Freeman, director of the International Women's Rights Action Watch Global Program at the University of Minnesota, agrees that the solution is not a radical change in Pakistan to reflect Western values, but an increase in women's choices within their own culture.
I think that when you look at how things work for people around the world, I have really never met anybody who says, I'd rather not be Pakistani. You know, I'd rather not be Spanish or whatever. I'd rather not be Tanzanian. What they want to be is who they are with choices.
For women in Pakistan, it is still difficult to exercise those choices, although some progress is being made on the legal front. Pakistan struggles to find the right path to give basic human rights to all of its citizens. I'm Dave DeForest.
This is Crossroads Asia on the Voice of America. The United States